right now from Detroit, Michigan. He is one of the true legends in the business, one of the greatest of all time, George The Animal Steele. Welcome to Ringside Radio in Philadelphia. George, how are you doing this morning?
Hey!
All right.
Very good, very good. Perfect. George, tell us a little bit about how you got into the business. I know, your heyday was in the 60s and the 70s, and then you kind of changed gears when we turned into the 1980s. But tell us what got you into the business in the first place. What made you want to be a wrestler?
I never wanted to be a wrestler. Are you crazy? The wrestling business was the farthest thing from my mind. I got out of Michigan State. My knees were blown from football. I was a football fan. I looked at wrestling as a joke, to be honest with you. I watched it. Never had any desire for it whatsoever. Period. I didn't respect it. I'll be honest with you. And I was making $4,300 a year teaching. I had 2 children. A third around the way. I needed money. And I went with one of my friends to bars to get a job as a bouncer, a part-time job. And I found out you don't drink beer and take a friend if you're trying to get a job as a bouncer. So I didn't get hired. God bless, thank God. My friend was a huge wrestling fan. He talked me into calling the local promoter at 2 o'clock in the morning. Hey, I want to be a wrestler type thing. It took a lot of talk because I didn't want to do it, to be honest with you. I woke the promoter up about 2 o'clock. He invited me over the next day. So I go over to his house. I knock on the door, ring the bell or whatever, and he answers the door, takes one look at me and says, "Beautiful." I look at him and I figure, okay, a gay blade, because I know what I look like. He invited me in. I met his wife, his mother-in-law, and his children, and kind of relaxed. Then we went into his office, and he started, I know nothing about wrestling. Again, nothing. And he started talking to me, and he had me take off my jacket and my shirt. He wanted to see my girth, I guess, and my look.
Right.
And when he spotted the hair on my body, he went absolutely nuts. Hey, beautiful! I'm going, whoa, switch hitter. Anyhow, he explained the business a little bit to me. I told him, again, I was a coach and a teacher, and I wasn't real excited about going on TV and wrestling. So we decided that I'd wear a mask and be the student because I was learning the business. And this guy was tremendous. Bert Ruby was his name. He didn't teach me how to wrestle or work in the ring. He taught me how to work the business.
Okay.
And how to get leverage in the business, which I think is the most important thing in the wrestling business. If you can work the promoter, you can make money. If you can't work the promoter, you're just going to be another guy. And I truly believe that was true way back when. I think it's true now. And then he sent me over to Windsor, Ontario. Some guys were going to train me to become a wrestler. And I was a pretty good athlete. So I go over there, and they start, they give me a lot of calisthenics, and I was in good shape. And then they would there were 3 or 4 guys there, and they'd go in the ring, and they'd beat you up. Well, I'm from the streets of Detroit, and I was a tough guy, I'll be honest with you. So I started giving them receipts. They'd hit me, I'd whack them. Come on, they thought they had me tired, but I wasn't that tired. I was going to take a beating. So after a little bit of that, they said, well, we're going to show you some things, but don't tell Bert, the promoter. So they started showing me how to work, which pissed me off. I thought they were challenging my integrity as an athlete.
Wow.
But I needed the money. When I told my wife I was going to be a wrestler and I was going over to Windsor, Ontario to learn how to wrestle, it was going to cost me 25 cents through the tunnel to go over there and 25 cents to come home. She told me you'll never make enough money to pay your tolls through the tunnel. So we didn't have a lot of confidence in any of that.
Wow.
And early on, I kind of thought it was true because I had to buy some boots. Now, things are tough, and these are hard times.
Right.
And I was looking for a job making $15 a night, being a bouncer, $10 even. And right out of the chute, my first payoff was $30, so I thought I had found a fortune. And in those days, I really had. I remember I had signed an NFL contract for, actually it was an AFL contract before they can emerge, for $8,500, which was huge for the time. Okay. My knees just wouldn't allow me to do that. So I was working 6 nights a week, teaching and coaching. I'd get out of school after practice 5:30, 6 o'clock, drive anywhere from 100 to 200 miles to wrestle in a show, and then come back, get back, have a few drinks with the guys naturally, come back and get back to bed maybe around 1:30 to 2 o'clock, and then the next day get up at 7:30 and start it all over again. So I was on a really tight schedule. The good thing is the old days we didn't travel in the airplanes and all that. I was riding in the back seat of a car. We stop and get some bologna and a few beers, and I was learning the wrestling business in the back seat of a car. The psychology of it, how to work the ring, how to work the crowd, how to do things. So I got a pretty good lesson that way, which I think a lot of the guys have missed today.
George,
working.
We talk about that all the time. The fact
great athletes, they're much better athletes than we ever were, and there's no doubt about that in my mind. And they're great kids. They just haven't had the opportunity to ride in the back seat of the car and eat bologna sandwiches and drink a few beers and have old timers correct every move you made in the ring and ask why you did that. And I never went in the ring until I wrestled Randy Savage with any knowledge of what I was going to do next. All that came in the ring. Everything was called in the ring. I was taught to do it that way. I believed in it. Later on, when I was an agent and guys were predetermined to everything, the business was passing me by. I had no clue, to be honest with you. First time I worked with Randy Savage, we were working on setting up the whole deal that we had a great 2-year run. He'd come in with 3 or 4 pages of handwritten matches and moves that we were going to do, and I looked at it. It kind of pissed me off. I've been in the business very long. I had a lot of success, and here's a kid who I'd wrestled with his dad, and I knew him when he was 11, 12 years old, trying to tell me how to do something. And I am hard-headed. So I read each page, I kind of wrinkled it up and threw it in the garbage and looked at him. Next one I read, and I threw it in the... and meanwhile, he was going, because he's getting hot. And then I looked at him, I said, son, listen to me, we'll have a great match. And turned around and walked away. He was really hot. But that's kind of how that whole program started. Now, as we worked almost 2.5 years, and a lot of the spots we did was repeated naturally because you could only do so many. But we never knew when they were going to come or how they were going to come. It was all called in the ring. My whole career was like that, working with Bruno. He's the world's champion in Madison Square Gardens. Sold out. I'm calling the show. I'm calling the matches because the heel used to call the matches. Bruno would call a little bit, and he was a great warrior. I mean, come on. Was he a great worker? No, but he was great at what he was doing. He portrayed the champion probably better than anyone that ever has until Hulk come along, and Hulk was not a great wrestler at all. He was had a great charisma and had a great situation. The timing was perfect for him, and wrestling changed at that time. 100%. It was a totally different business. From being one of the wildest brawling heels that sold out all over the Northeast, I'm talking about myself now.
Sure.
I became a cartoon character, and I was more at that time. I was more about selling mine dolls, lunch buckets, little toys to kids. So the business had totally changed.
Well, George, how did that make you feel? I wanted to ask you about that. You were a monster heel in the 70s, and then really a parody of yourself in the 80s. And how did that make you feel? Did you really go along with that? Were you?
I remember. No, I never did anything that I didn't want to do.
Okay.
No one ever told me what to do. No one ever did. I mean, we were doing it. I don't know if you remember it or not, but I did a thing where they were giving me electric shocks in the head.
Yes. And
Vince would give me a long poem to remember. I'm dyslexic. I mean, come on, give me a break. So when we went on, and he thought I was going to do this long poem. He never knew what I was going to do. And instead of doing this long poem, I said, "How now, brown cow?" Which people still repeat to me. If I'd have done what he wanted me to do, I'd have farted at it. Come on. So remember, I didn't, when I gained a lot of respect for the business when I learned how to work. But remember, I was never a big fan of wrestling. It was never a big deal to me. It was strictly about the money. I needed the money. I worked part-time from 1962 to January of 1986. All that time, I was a part-time wrestler, a full-time teacher and coach.
Okay.
So, the wrestling was a part-time business to me. Did I worry about changing my look a little bit or becoming a cartoon? The checks went up. It was about the money. It was never about Jim Myers being a wrestler. I was never caught up in that character character stuff that a lot of guys in my time and still are, start believing they're that character. That's a joke. Come on. If I was George the Animal Steele in real life, my kids wouldn't respect me. I'd be in jail.
That's very, very, very true. Jim Myers, better known as George the Animal Steele, and George, who was your favorite person to work with in the ring? You mentioned Randy Savage, and you're probably, one of your two legendary feuds. The other one was with Bruno Sammartino. But who was your actual favorite person to work with over the years?
I don't know if it was Bruno, Pedro Morales, Bobby Backlund. I had a couple of matches with Hulk, Randy Savage. I don't know. Anyone I could make money with. I didn't really, if they could work. Now, I'll tell you who I didn't like to work with. Somebody that got in the ring and didn't know what they were doing. I threw one guy over the top rope in one match 17 times, screaming, "You don't belong in here. Get out of here." And I was going. I looked. This is when I was a cartoon character. I look at one side of the ring, and I ask people, "Do you want them?" I had people on both sides. "Yeah, over here." Then I throw them over there. And every time I throw them, I say, "Get your ass out of here. You don't belong in here."
Was that anybody of notoriety?
No.
Okay.
No, he didn't belong in there.
Nice. Hey, George. Tell us about the transition when you sat on Tuesday Night Titans with Captain Lou Albano and you turned into this larger than life character, and all of a sudden you were no longer that monster heel. Was it different to work as a face?
No, when I went back, here's what happened. Vince McMahon Sr., Vince's dad, and I were very, very close. I don't think we were close because of the business. He liked it because I was a coach and we could talk sports and that kind of thing. He was huge into boxing and promoting boxing. So we were pretty close. So last time I was in the Gardens, and he was still alive, he called me into the office, and he told me, "Jim," he says, "I want you to, this is going to be your last run." Now, what happened to me is every summer, I'd take about 4 years, and I'd take a year off, but almost every summer for 20-some years, or 18 years, I'm on top in the Northeast, and all the large arenas making a lot of money. He told me this was going to be my last run, because he didn't want to see me become one of those old hang-arounds that couldn't perform anymore. And at that time, I was about 50 years old, so he was right. And he had a tear in his eye. I had a tear in my eye, and we kind of hugged, and it was like I was all done. He died that spring. Then I get this call from the guy that was booking for Vince. I can't think of his name right now. Great guy, anyhow, and they wanted me to come back, and then they started throwing what they wanted me to do, and I kind of laughed at it. And he told my wife, I said, this isn't going to work. So I went in. I was still teaching, and we did the switch with Elizabeth and Randy, and first of all, the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov and I were in a tag team, and they double-crossed me and wouldn't tag me, and I got beat, and no one told me what to do. We didn't know, and that was kind of like the end of me. We didn't know where it was going to go, but they wanted to change me to a cartoon character. And the place got real quiet because I never got beat like that and just left. And I'd been around for a long time, so the people knew me very, very well. The crowd just didn't know, and Vince didn't know what to do. It was just real shady. So he sent Captain Lou down to try to calm me down because I was going crazy and throwing up turnbuckles and all that stuff.
Right.
And he come down and I was like I was going to hit him about 4 times. Then for some reason, God in control, I guess, I dropped on my knees and put my head on his belly, and he started patting my head like it was a real animal. And the place went absolutely nuts. Totally crazy. It switched me like that, not to a baby face. I was never a baby face. I never worked out, I never went out and, tried to be a baby face. I did a little bit because they tried to sell more than I ever did, but that was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. But in my matches, I always maintained the wild kind part of it a little bit, but in a lovable way. And the people who just bought into it big time. At that point in time, of all the baby faces they had there, and I'm not egotistical because I'm not really huge into what happened in the wrestling business. Hulk was the man, and then the next we ran 2 or 3 shows. Then the B card was me and Randy Macho Man or somebody else. So it got over huge, really got over. I didn't think it would. And then when I saw what was happening, that's when I quit teaching and went full-time wrestling. My last football team was undefeated. We were rated #1 in the state of Michigan, and I had a lot of seniors on there, so it was a good time for me to leave. And then I had interviews, why are you so crazy now? And I'd say, coaching football would drive you nuts.
Hey, George, you said you did make that full-time transition in the 80s. We talked to a lot of the legends about locker room politics, and it doesn't seem like you got mixed up into that stuff. But locker room politics, drug use, what kind of things did you see in the WWF locker room in the 1980s?
Well, I switched over in 86, so I already had some of the 80s in me, and these young people were coming in, and the business was changing in a lot of different ways. I remember now, I'm a teacher and a coach, and that's my first love. So I'm not going to ride around with somebody that's got cocaine in their bag or smoking pot in the car, because if I got busted, that would ruin my teaching career, my coaching career. So I was very selective in who I rode with and what I did. I'm not saying now. I got to tell you, I'm not saying that it was totally clean.
Right.
I always had a Crown Royal in my pocket from way back when. If Bobo Brazil was on a card and you heard George Steele was there, where's he at? Because they all, I always had a large bottle of Crown Royal with me, and I drank. I wasn't a drunk, but I liked to take a few sips before I went to the ring. I'd been around drugs. I tried them a little bit, but not much. They didn't do much for me. I thought it was kind of stupid. Plus, I didn't want to get busted. I mean, that was a big fear of mine. But the locker room was crazy. Even later on as an agent, I'd see guys giving each other shots and so on. It was pretty rapid. But at that time, it was legal.
Right.
Steroids was not illegal. At that time, they were, they weren't busting any laws. And but there was a lot of smoke going on. And later on, I wasn't, I'm kind of naive with a lot of that stuff. I wasn't aware of the cocaine and stuff until, maybe 86, 87. And that was probably going on earlier, but that's kind of when I noticed that. The locker room politics, there was 4 or 5 of us. I was one that would always, I liked ribs, not ribs like, what's his name? Fuji. Some nasty ribs that was going to hurt somebody. I didn't like any of that at all. In fact, if somebody pooped in my bag, they were a dead man. But I liked ribs that would play with somebody's mind. I always did. I was always screwing around, having fun with people. And we would disturb the locker room a little bit. Another guy that was kind of laid back that was the Mexican kid, Tito Santana, and another one was the Junkyard Dog. I mean, we had a lot of fun in the locker room. We were screwing around and messing with people's minds and so on and so forth. And when new guys would come in, we'd mess with them a little bit, but never anything that was going to damage themselves, them clothes, or anything like that. None of that nonsense.
George.
So the locker room, the politics only work between the politicians. Most of them, if you really look at it from the point of making the dollar, other than Hulk, and Hulk was never, his politics was done with Vince, not in the locker room. And he leveraged himself very well, and did very well with it. But the locker room politics was just for the politicians, and most of them were working in the middle to under. Some of them would get a shot on top for a little while. The funny one was Piper. I love Piper, so you need to understand this. But when he came in, he wanted to ride with me, and particularly me. So him and I went after a TV show back to wherever we were going. And he started telling me that I was destroying the business, that I was ruining kayfabe. And I said, "How's that?" He said, "Well, you eat the turnbuckle, and we run people as soft it is with the padding in there, and we run people's head in it, and they sell it." I said, "Rodney, how stupid are you?" I said, you never see me run my head into the post or into the turnbuckle and sell it. I always go over the top and hit my head on the post. If you want to run your head into a pillow and sell it, that's your call. Don't blame me for that."
Oh, yeah, very good.
And so we kind of got friendly after that. My daughter got very, very, very sick, deathly ill, and she went through a long healing process, and Rodney sent her a huge bouquet. And that really impressed her and impressed me, and from that day on, he's been one of my favorite people in the wrestling business because of that gesture.
George, we wanted to ask you, who are your friends in the wrestling business? I know you mentioned Junkyard Dog, but who are the people that you really got along with and had a lasting relationship outside of the wrestling business?
To this day, you mean?
Yes.
Most of them are dead. Cicluna, Luna was one of my very best friends and traveling partners. Danny Spivey, simply because I knew that when he was with me, that his suitcase was going to be clean.
All-American.
Huh?
I said the All-American, Danny Spivey.
Yeah, and Hillbilly Jim was a good friend. We traveled a lot together. Other than that, early on, the first time I went to the Northeast, there was a guy by the name of Tony Altamore, and his tag team partner was Lou Albano.
Okay.
And they took me under the wing. I just flew in, and and I was flying out every Sunday because we had Sundays off at that time, and then I'd fly back in Monday and be on the road through the week, and I'd ride with them. They'd always say, "We'll pick you up, we'll take you," and they took me. They picked me to the hotel. They brought me up. They treated me like a king. Every time we stopped to eat, going up down in the Northeast, they would grab my tab, and they would buy my meal. They would let me pay for the gas, but I could never buy a meal that whole summer. And at the end of the year, when I got ready to leave, they called me in and they brought this big paper bag in full of all the bills that they hadn't paid that I had walked out on. Great rib. It was like, welcome to the Northeast.
Hey, George, we wanted to ask you again about, from an artistic standpoint, your work as the monster heel in the 70s versus your work in the 80s. Just from a purely artistic standpoint, which did you like the best?
Well, I'm a natural heel. I mean, I loved being a heel. I started making more money as a cartoon character, so it made no difference to me. I liked them both. I learned to express myself. Wrestling saved me probably from going to jail because I was a street person. I was a tough guy. I had a learning disability. I got through college. God knows how. I don't know. I was teaching. Again, very dyslexic. Couldn't hardly read or write. I was a street guy. I was a tough guy. And so when I was playing the role of George The Animal Steele, the heel, I was living what I might have probably been doing if I hadn't got married and I got my life turned around. I mean, so it was just a very natural thing to me. I never sit down and said, okay, what am I going to do today? I'd be sitting there talking to the guys, and the character of George Steele was very real to me. When I left the locker room, I didn't know what I was going to do. If there was a chair there, I might pick it up and throw. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got in the ring. I had guys that were going to put me over on TV, and they'd come up and say, what are we doing today? And I'd look at them and say nothing, and I'd give them that strange look and walk away. They'd come up later on and say, what are we going to do today? Nothing. And just before they go to the ring, now they're really kind of panicky. They'd say, what are we going to do today? I'd say nothing, because you can't screw up nothing, and walk away from them. And that I had them looking like I wanted them to look, because I wasn't going to sell them anyhow. Yes. I was going in to chop meat. That's the way I worked on, my TV matches before I turned into the cartoon character. I never sold anybody anything. I just went in and beat them up. When I got to the ring for the house shows, the people were really into it. I didn't have to get a lot of heat. Working with Bruno, I already had the heat. I worked one night with him in 17 minutes, and we never touched. Getting out of the ring, running from it, being a huge chicken. And then when we finally touched, the roof went off, and we only had to do another 25 or 30 minutes to get the match done right.
George, we talk about that all the time because wrestling in the 70s and 80s, you could do that. You could run around the ring for 20 minutes, whip the fans up into a frenzy without ever touching anybody. And now it's like you have to do 17 chair shots and fall on a bed of tacks to elicit a response from the crowd. It's just a different atmosphere and a different environment.
No, it's a totally different business.
Right.
I had no time constraints on me because I was in the house show. That's where I made my money. TV, I would only work 5 or 6 minutes, chop meat. But the house shows, I had 45 minutes to an hour if I wanted it, and no one ever told me how long to go. So to make the match right, I had no time constraint. What they have now is everything is about television. And you got to have a commercial in there. You got to have this done. You cannot work a match today. There's no way I could walk in with the constraints that the kids have today and work a match. I couldn't do it. Because when I get to, sometimes it took me 15 minutes to get the people right where I wanted them, and we've already had 2 commercials. Come on.
Right.
You go to a pay-per-view. I've been there, as an agent, and it just, you can't work it because everything is time-consuming. You cannot work that way. You gotta call it like they call it now. It has to be done that way. And some people say, they need to go back. And they can't. These are great athletes, but they can't do what we did. And I'll tell you what, we can't do what they're doing. Totally different business. Totally different.
Hey, George, we have a very serious question for you. Probably the most serious question we have for you today.
This is going to be a funny. Go ahead.
How did you get the green tongue?
Oh, it's very. We had a really huge creation team, and they all sit down for 4 hours and decided, what are we going to do with the animal? And while they were thinking, I went out and had a couple of drinks, and I put a couple of clarets in my mouth so nobody would know it, that I had the drinks, and went on live TV, and a green tongue come out, and everybody went nuts. By accident. Everything I did was, but nothing was planned. So I did that in Pittsburgh, and the place went nuts. The following Friday, when we went on a house show, there was signs of green tongues over the place. I laughed at it. I thought it was funny. About 3 months later, I thought, well, I'm going to do that green tongue thing again. So I did it on purpose the second time, got the same reaction. After that, I had the best breath of all of wrestling.
Also, do you watch wrestling today?
Occasionally. I'll tell you what happened. They have a Legends contract, and it was a huge opportunity for me. I opted not to sign it. Okay. And I'll tell you exactly why. Could I use the extra money? Hell yeah, so we all could. But I just found my faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. I watched the wrestling shows at that time pretty regularly, and they had started doing the fornication in the coffin, gay marriage, and all the things that didn't fit with my faith. So that's when I kind of quit watching wrestling. I didn't like it. I didn't think it was healthy for my grandchildren or for me or for anyone in my faith.
Sure.
And I opted not to sign the contract. Not because of any other reason other than it was contrary to my faith. Now, there's other guys that have a lot of faith that continue to take part in the wrestling. And I understand that, and I'm not judging them or misjudging them. That's their choice. And they might be more right than I am, because you can go in there with your faith and talk about guys that maybe need to talk. You might have saved some of the young lives by changing lifestyles a little bit, because wrestling is not why people die young. It's their choices that has caused all that. So that's my take on it was, that's not what I believe in. That's not what I'm about. So I quit watching it. A few, maybe 6 months ago or 8 months ago, somebody said, they've changed, they've cleaned up their act. So I started peeking at it a little bit, and they have changed their act, and it's become a lot cleaner, and it's more in tune to what I believe. That's the only reason that I should school show 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Right.
If they had to change that part of it, I wouldn't be there, because I was asked to do a lot of things earlier on. The reason I didn't do it because it did not fit with my faith or my belief.
Right. I'm
pretty stubborn. I told you earlier. I'm a hardhead.
Hey, when we were talking about you coming on, there was that prerequisite that it had to be a family-oriented show, and I respect that. I appreciate that. George, GeorgeSteele.com is your website, and right. That has all of your, you talk about your history there, you talk about your faith and motivational speaking and all of that stuff, and you are a man of the Christian faith. And when did that start to dominate your life? Was there a transformation period? Was it after you got out of the business that you started to find God? It
started way back when I was a kid, probably, but I didn't realize it. There was a charismatic minister when I was about 8 or 9 years old. It said that God built earth in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Just screamed at me, scared the poop out of me. And then later on, the same guy said, if you sin, you're going to burn in hell. I didn't understand anything about salvation, and I'd already stole some gum, so I figured I was dead meat. And I went through a life kind of like that. Then I was, the reason I quit wrestling was not because of the age factor, which it very well could have been, but my character was such that I could have went on for another 100 years. I got very sick with the Crohn's disease. There's no cure for Crohn's. And I was deathly ill. And when I was an agent, I was deathly ill, and on some crazy drugs. They gave me some huge mood swings. But I felt like I needed to be doing something. And I think that Vince saved my life by using me as an agent. He kept me busy rather than sitting home and brooding over my disease. I actually shut down and died twice on the table. The second time, after I started doing some other things and started to get my health back. I told my wife, let's go church shopping and eliminate the Baptist church. So we go to this huge Baptist church, and there's a lot of kids in. I remember both my wife and I were teachers, and we love youth. And so we walk into this church, and there's a lot of young people there. What we did not realize was there was a gospel singer from Australia, and this church had a K through 12 school, so there's a lot of kids there. The following Tuesday was 9/11.
Oh.
Duh! I mean, we went back to the same church, and we live on the Space Coast, and there was a lot of military there. So that was kind of the hook for me, and we waited another 2002, June 16th. My wife and I were both baptized. My life changed at that time. It really did. And my whole outlook on life changed, and it's been so much better. And good things just keep happening. I got people now talking to me. They want me to go back and write a book. I've never really been interested. I'm dyslexic. Come on. But they want to help me do that. And the deal is, there's been so many wrestling books written. And again, remember, I'm a money man.
Sure.
Is there a market for it? Probably not. But then they said, well, you know, you're not. If we just wrote a book on wrestling, it'd be just another book. But you've done a lot more than that: the teaching, the coaching, wrestling part time, and achieving the things that I have. You know, was fortunate enough to work the promoters into doing or whatever. It could be a great story for a lot of young people. Plus the health. And I'm no longer. There's no cure for Crohn's, but I no longer have Crohn's. My faith, the teaching, the speaking, the whole other rest of my life beyond wrestling. Using wrestling as a main focal point might be a great book. I don't know if it would or not. I don't know if I'm going to do it or not. But they are talking about it, and it could be very interesting.
Well, you have to keep us posted right here on Ringside Radio. The people of Philadelphia, I'm sure, would love to read that book. And, George, I'm way overdue for a break, but I want to thank you.
I'm sorry I dragged you too long. I got one more story I'm going to tell you.
All right, well, let's hear it.
It's real quick. There's a guy over there right now that's doing a great job for the WWF called The Miz.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes, you are.
How ironic is that?
Wow.
Absolutely. He is the finest in...
Well, listen to this.
Yep.
Way back when he was a young puppy, he was doing... I didn't know this till a guy called me 3 or 4 days ago. He was doing a part of a fundraiser for at a softball game. And he had told me earlier that he wanted to be a wrestler, and I kind of looked at him and said, I rolled my eyes, okay, yo-yo. Anyhow, this game was going on way too long, and I had my granddaughter there, was about 17. She wanted to get out and do something, and my wife was with me, and she was sitting down to the dugout. We need to get out of here. We're only in the 4th inning. It's late. And so I told the guy that was running the promotion, I said, I need to get out of here. He said, well, that kid over there wants to be a wrestler. I said, okay, just tell him to give me some lip when I go up by the bases there, and I'll whack him with a chair a couple times, and he can chase me out of here. I found out 3 or 4 days ago that was The Miz.
Wow.
Very interesting.
Isn't that crazy?
Very, very, very interesting. And George, he's one of the only guys that can really carry his own promo right now and really invoke feeling in the fans. I really believe that.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean,
God bless him. I wish him a lot of good luck. I got to hit him with a chair before he was...
Hey, and I just want to mention, too, while George is still on, that this interview was brought to us by OneWrestling.com, and the legendary Bill Apter says hello, George.
Oh, tell him I said hi. Send me a link to your show, will you, please?
Absolutely. We'll send you a copy of the interview, and thank you so much for spending some time with us right here in Philadelphia.
God bless and have a great day.
All right, you as well. That is George the Animal Steele. We'll take a break, and we will come back on the other side.